Let us talk how roles and direct grants come into play when compiling subprograms. Let us first briefly talk about direct grants and roles. Direct grants is what we have been using so far to assign privileges to a user. Using direct grants, we explicitly specify privileges to a user directly. So let us say user test is trying to create a procedure using the employee table and getEmpCount function of the demo schema. Direct grants to these objects can be assigned to the test user by either a DBA or by the user demo. Grant select update insert delete on demo.employee to test will grant the necessary privileges on the demo.employee table to the test user. Grant execute on demo.getEmpCount to test will grant the execute privileges on the getEmpCount function to the test user. Role is a mechanism through which you grant multiple privileges to users in the database using a role name. A role can be granted to another role. These are typically created based on the functions users perform or based on their business roles. For instance, you may create a role named accounting, grant to the accounting role appropriate privileges on the accounting tables and procedures. Then, instead of providing direct grants to each and every employee in the accounting department, you just assign them the one accounting role. That way, if you add or remove privileges from the role, it reflects on all the users having that role. So it allows managing privileges at a group level. Continuing with the previous direct grant example, let us see how we can give the user test the privileges now using a role. A DBA will issue these statements. Create role human resources creates a role named human resources. Grant select update insert delete on demo.employee to human resources grants the necessary privileges on the employee table to the human resources role. Grant execute on demo.getEmpCount to human resources grants the execute privileges on the getEmpCount function to the human resources role. This way, grants to the table employee and function getEmpCount is given to human resources role. Then the statement grant human resources to test grants the role to test, thus assigning the privileges now using a role. When compiling subprograms using the authID definer clause, roles are disabled and only direct grants would work inside the subprogram. So here, user test starts a session and tries to compile a function updateEmp referring to the demo.employee table and demo.getEmpCount function. If the privileges are granted through a role, then there will be compilation errors as Oracle will not be able to resolve the external references to the demo.employee table and demo.getEmpCount function. Only when direct grants are made would user test be able to compile the procedure successfully. This is a very important concept to understand, and oftentimes developers stumble upon this. I think the rationale behind this is that typically there is one owner schema or just a few of them which contain objects, but there can be hundreds or thousands of users who would be calling or using these objects. Typically you would manage these consuming users in mass by using roles and would grant specific privileges only to the schema owners. This is because if you make changes to the privileges to a role, all affected subprograms would be marked invalid and would have to be recompiled. This is not a very efficient model for compile once and reuse many times for subprograms. That will create a lot of overhead for Oracle to recompile these subprograms every time changes are made to the role. So that is why roles are disabled and only direct grants are used for compilation inside the subprogram with the authID definer clause. This allows you to make changes to the privileges assigned to the roles without affecting the subprograms, which is much more efficient. For invokers write though, since a runtime evaluation of the privileges of the calling user is done, roles are enabled at runtime for privilege checking. Note, this is a runtime check only and is not done at the compilation time. So for compilation, the compiling user will still need direct grants in order to resolve references in the subprogram in order to compile it. So here, say user test is given direct grants to the demo.employee table and the demo.getEmpCount function, and it is able to successfully compile the updateEMP function in its own schema. Now let us say we create a role, HR role, to which we grant select, update, insert, delete on the demo.employee table. Say we have another user dev in our system to whom we assign the execute privileges on the test.updateEMP function. We also grant the HR role to dev through which it gets the privileges on the demo.employee table. Now if user dev starts a session, it will be able to successfully execute the test.updateEMP function. At runtime, Oracle will evaluate the privileges assigned to it via the role and apply them. This way, the user dev can still execute the update to the demo.employee table using its privileges it got via the role. As we noticed in this example, user dev was given direct privileges on just the updateEMP function. Through HR role, it got privs on the demo.employee table, but it was not given any privilege on the demo.getEmpCount function directly or indirectly. But it was still able to execute the demo.getEmpCount function through the updateEMP function indirectly. However, if user dev tries to execute the demo.getEmpCount function directly, it will not be able to do so. This illustrates an important fact that only the privileges on the external references in DML or dynamic SQL statements are checked at runtime. For all other external references, like direct function calls, the privileges are checked at compile time but not at runtime. And so, for these, the privileges of the compiling user are used to execute them. This gives you a fine-grained control of providing direct execution rights to a user on just a few appropriate subprograms, and allow only indirect access or execution on some other programs through the direct access ones.